Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Hannah Jennings, Community Organizer at Tech in Motion, and I'm excited to be the one to welcome you here today. As you all settle in, continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, say hello, feel free to drop your LinkedIns, maybe where you're tuning in from, and get to know everyone here today. For those of you who have been to Tech in Motion events before, you know we've been bringing together the tech community since 2011 when Motion Recruitment first launched this series. Tech in Motion has always been about learning from industry leaders, making meaningful connections, and being inspired by innovation. And that's what we're here to do today. Today, we're especially excited to have you here for the first session of our Tech Talent Series, which brings together industry leaders to share insights from Motion Recruitment's recently launched 2026 Tech Salary Guide, helping you decode the hiring tech market, sharpen your transferable skills, and build resilient teams. This three-part virtual spotlight series is designed to help you stay competitive in the year ahead. Over the next few weeks, we'll be hosting sessions that blend data, leadership insights, and actionable takeaways to help you and your team make informed career and business decisions in a changing tech market. Be sure to keep an eye on the chat for even more data points and takeaways from this year's guide. Also, feel free to give us your own take on the trends shaping the 2026 tech market and see if your perception matches reality. We'll have lots of polls and pop-ups throughout the event, so be sure to give your input. Each conversation in the series will run for about 30 minutes, and then we will open up breakout rooms so you can ask our experts your follow-up questions. So if you're able to, be sure to stay until the end of today's session. Now, let's dive into today's discussion. Today's session features Chris Walek and Greg Olsen from Motion Recruitment, who will kick off this series with a data-driven look at today's tech hiring landscape and how you can successfully navigate it. So, Chris and Greg, I will hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? Thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon with us today. Again, I am Greg. I'm one of the executive directors at Motion Recruitment, specifically for our Washington, D.C. office. Chris, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but kind of special. We're in the same city today. It's kind of cool.
Yep. I'm in DC with Greg today. Everyone, I'm Chris Walek, Vice President for Motion Recruitment. I do personally and lead both sales and recruiting teams. So we definitely have a really interesting and unique perspective on the market that we're happy to share with everyone as much as we've learned, because boy, oh boy, 25 was interesting.
It definitely was. And so we have a lot we want to cover today with you guys. Hopefully we don't run over.
Greg, do you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a lot we want to cover with you guys. Hopefully we don't run over into the Q&A. One of the things that we have tried to do in this series throughout the course of, I think this is the third time, Chris, that we've been together throughout the course of the year so far doing these, is we try to give a pretty unique perspective of what's kind of going on in the hiring market, given just the fact that this is just what me and Chris do throughout the course of our entire day. So one of the things we want to talk about, obviously, with 2025 being such an interesting year for a bunch of different reasons, we wanted to cover that. I don't know where Chris is. We've lost him. Chris, I think you're having...
Let me change rooms. Sorry, everyone.
All right, we're going to wait for Chris to come back. One of the things I was going to say, so today we're going to cover basically 4 kind of distinct different points. We're going to talk first and give a look both on how we got to the year as is. We're going to talk a little bit about going into the start of next year, some trends in what we expect to kind of see within the market. We'll spend a little time talking about skill in demand. And then we will end basically with a brief kind of segment on networking. So, okay, I think as Chris figures this out, I'm going to start out and just kind of start going a little bit for you guys. So one of the things I wanted to first show you guys, which is very interesting, is when you think about kind of the entire year. This was a chart that I thought was very interesting. So this is pulled from Motion's tech salary guide. But what this shows is, I think at face value, if you asked anyone what they thought about the hiring market so much throughout 2025, you would kind of have your same little blanket answers for what you would go to. It's been tough to find a job. There's a lot of anxiety. What's really interesting, though, is if you look at this, 2025 so far really has been less of a layoff story, so much as it's more been a lack of an addition story. So I saw an article in CNBC this morning which talked about there have been a reported 1.1 million jobs that were lost across the entire U.S. economy within 2025. Obviously, it's a big number, but when you really drill into specifically what are credited as IT jobs that were lost within the engineering sector, really all that was 120,000. Still a big number. But what's kind of crazy is, as someone like myself, I've been with Motion for 13 years, so I've worked obviously through the last 5 years of a lot of different ups and downs. When you look at kind of what we experienced even 2 years ago, there was a huge uptick in really that market being driven by layoffs. There's a bunch of things talked about in uptick in basically post-COVID hiring and companies really adding a lot of people. And then obviously there was a revision to that. So even though the entire market at large really felt like we are losing a bunch of people, and it kind of probably felt like that way, especially if you were looking for a job throughout 2025. Throughout the course of this year, it wasn't so much that we saw companies letting people go, but really just a aspect of folks not adding people. What does that kind of mean? I think, how do you get to that point? I think there was obviously a lot of narratives that kind of helped drive that point to get to where we were. But what's interesting is when I really think about like this year and specifically what I saw from, a lot of trends when I think about specifically in Washington, D.C., what I expected to maybe see at the start of the year versus the end of it. I saw less of a issue with companies contributing, not addition to AI, but really, oh my God, Chris, you're back.
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly now.
Okay. Sorry, I was using a power outlet that apparently was giving me 0 power, so that was fun. Apologies for that, but
so all you've really missed so far is I was pretty much talking about how the assumption of so far within like the story of the hiring market leaving 2025, I was talking about how it really felt like this year was less of a feeling of a layoff story versus more of each company feeling like almost stop and go on if they should add or if they shouldn't add. Before we talk about next year, 2026, and what we think we're seeing, I guess when you think about whether it's the entire last year or even the last couple months, what's kind of been your take or your perspective or what you've been seeing in the market?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think 2025, I keep saying, is the perfect storm of several huge factors in the market that have really combined to make it a very confusing and uncertain one. So companies are in this position now where they're trying to figure out a use case for AI is a huge driver, right? You literally cannot be a CEO or a publicly traded company without talking about where you're implementing AI. But you don't have a model to work off of, right? So what you're trying to do usually is invest in something brand new, create your own product roadmap for it, and figure out how to do all that without a lot of new investment. So the interesting lag in why isn't it creating more jobs, I think a lot of articles are saying it hasn't really truly replaced many positions at all. I read one article recently that they couldn't find a single position it had truly replaced. But what you have are a lot of these companies trying to work with their existing teams instead of throwing a lot of new money at it because they have to create a business case. That's one of the things. The other thing we've seen a lot of is M&A activity. It's actually, I was just listening to folks from Bain Capital talk about it. M&A is up 11% year over year, but it's a little bit different. The companies that are doing the purchasing are large, and they're buying a lot larger companies. Mergers and acquisitions, M&A. When you have companies doing that, like when they're acquiring large other companies, usually they're not going to hire because they just inherited 2,000 people, and they're going to figure out what can we do with these folks, right? And then I think the third, perfect storm, I like to think of like three intersecting storms, I think was the famous tale. And the third is really just that the cost of money is high. And what that has also led to that I've seen is there's been a lack of equity financing, in the sense of like, I want to give a startup money for just equity, right? There's been a lot of debt financing. So I'll give you money at an interest rate because right now the interest rates are high. I can make a lot of money as a lender. But what really, really has driven innovation during the earlier years was the equity financing. You believe in this product, you believe in the market fit. I'm going to ride this ship, to its exit in some form. And I think that, that third cost of money and really cost of not doing heavy equity financing is also leading to, kind of to your point, there's less layoffs, but we're not seeing enough of the growth to usually offset those. Because when I look at a chart like this, I would be like, holy cow, there's got to be overemployed engineers out there. And that's just not the case. So
yeah, so I'm interested to hear, because when I look at specifically the office that I oversee, and really when I think about the folks here in DC that work with me, we just focus on Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So while I have a pulse of what's going on nationally, from a really, really good focus I have really within this area. So I'm seeing, when I think about like the start of next year, specifically if I was someone looking for a job, or even like the activity that I'm seeing, the last couple months has felt significantly different. I would say if you're looking for a job, it's felt better. And going off of what you were just saying, one of the things that's interesting is next year, right now, tech hiring is expected to almost basically go twice the rate of what's there. And that's awesome. Obviously, it's making up some ground. But when you think about whether from things you're seeing or from companies that you're working with that are telling you if they do have growth plans next year, like what's driving that, are you seeing this from an example of either maybe what a company thought was going to be accomplished from AI is actually not coming, or it's way farther away than what they thought? Is some of what's driving some of the newer activity right now, is this something different? Is this just actual expansion? Is this people being able to be more productive and more stuff happening? Like, what do you think is driving any sort of rebound or surge that's kind of happening right now, or is projected to start happening in the next couple months?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have a conversation anymore that doesn't include the two letters of AI in it. I think you're silly not to figure out if there are efficiency improvements in your company that AI can solve, right? Your competitors are certainly doing it. There's also, though, there's some new obstacles that demand innovation and investment too. So I'll give you an example, and I believe it's we have a slide on it. The cybersecurity landscape is one where you can't get away not investing in the cybersecurity space right now. Just as an example. Yeah, thanks for
right here. Yeah.
Yep. And so why is that, right? Cybersecurity is not directly AI related, but the fact of the matter is, with a lot of these new models and systems, they are being weaponized against companies. I actually think Jensen Huang was recently talking about this with NVIDIA. He's saying, like 1,000 times a second, they have an AI bot attacking the system, but he can sleep well because they built their own AI agents to play defense. And, that's NVIDIA. They have a lot of capital. They can solve their own problems, but every financial firm is going to be experiencing the same thing, right? AI is going to allow, any of our hackers, any of our enemies to 100-fold their attacks, and you have to invest in obviously preventing that. So I think it's like there's offensive and defensive AI, right? What is happening out there, and how can we protect ourselves, as well as then what's happening internally, and how can we improve things, which I think this graph does a good job. Like that first one's really, to me, the internal improvements. How can we get more out of all of our people, more out of our software engineers, more of our finance? How can we stay more compliant and reduce our risk by using these AI models? And then you see that huge demand, and why a lot of these are understaffed for the cybersecurity space, for the audit space, and the compliance space specifically. So thanks for putting this one up. I like this graph.
One of the things, no, that was awesome. One of the things I wanted to show you guys, and it's always hard because the graphic you guys are looking at right now, the two lines, basically the green line shows 2025, and the blue line shows last year. This is just by month, the number of people that my office helped find, the DC region helped find work. And what's really, really interesting, and I think what's, at least for us locally, driving a lot of optimism going into next year, even as we're still trying to figure out what is leading to this kind of surge, is going into every year, you almost expect to see really similar patterns from when companies add people start to emerge. It's at the start of the year, it's a little bit slower. Companies are kind of starting to figure out, whether from holiday schedules or just actually getting stuff in place, what they're going to add and start doing it. You usually see a really big spike that happens in March. And as kind of projects are underway, things really happening, you anticipate seeing a little dip in the summer. And then usually there's kind of a boost you'll see before the start of the fall, and then stuff kind of tapers off. And so whether we were showing this graphic during 2020 when these numbers were changing slightly, obviously that boom I just talked about right afterwards, where basically every company was hiring, no matter how high or low these are going to vary, if you had my job and you basically ran a staffing firm and had Chris's job and did the same thing, you anticipate these kind of like typical seasonal highs and lows to be a little more predictable. What's really interesting right now is, from just a pure number of folks that we helped find new work, November was the second highest month for at least this location, which, if you followed the news at all, the hiring market within DC has been insane. In the spring, you had everything from Doge to voluntary resignations through a shutdown. Like, it's been a crazy landscape down here. So, as we're trying to internalize this locally on like what is leading to I don't want to say abnormal in a bad way, but what's leading to a ton of momentum of companies basically adding folks right now, it's really interesting because I can look at this and I can say, I think for some focuses, I think it's federal agencies that are able to add again. I think for some places, maybe positions they didn't think they would need because of AI, maybe we're realizing it's a little farther away, so there's now an ad for this. I think companies have now realized that there's actually a secret, very, very competitive aspect to hiring for specific titles and types of positions, whether that is through well-funded backed startups that are now probably the most aggressive when it comes to hiring for the blanket term of AI. It's been a really, really interesting landscape. But again, as someone that runs a staffing office, I look at this and it obviously makes me very optimistic and excited about what's happening in general. I think if you're also looking for a job yourself and you're someone in that kind of position, I would look at this as a data point of like, okay, that could mean a lot of different things. This is obviously specific to one location, so it doesn't mean everything for the entire nation or every sector. But I look at this and it is, again, for me, interesting. It's like, okay, this is at least some sort of data that's pointing in this direction, which is good. Question I had for you. So you were talking about this slide a second ago where this showed basically, or no, it was this right here. So this was basically areas within organizations that companies felt like they were understaffed. I guess when you're specifically trying to think about, or if someone's asking your advice on like, if there was a skill set, if there was an area, if there was a insert whatever that I'm trying to get better at to position myself in the market to be set up for right now, next year, and the next 5 years. This shows skill sets that were listed as being in demand, but what is kind of your take right now on like what you anticipating either still being in demand, anything emerging? Like what is from a skill set standpoint it look like in your opinion next year?
I'll answer that, but I wanted to make a point on also part of why we could be seeing somewhat of a resurgence. Like you've obviously showed what you guys are doing in DC, and I'd be remiss not to make mention of what I've seen negatively impact actually the job market a little bit, and why I think we're coming out of it. When you entered 2025, there was a lot of excitement and promise from what AI can do. I remember, I've never heard of so many different tech products that we can use to solve everything, right? Spend less time recruiting and engaging candidates and vet and screen candidates. And we demoed a lot of them. More recently, though, I've actually started to see what I'll call like a little bit of AI fatigue. So in the job market specifically, when I talk to hiring leaders, obviously I sell our services and obviously we fill positions. When I talk to these hiring leaders, they always say the same thing. I have 1,000 applicants for this position, right? So of course, in any other year, I'd have this job filled, right? I have 1,000 people that applied to it and want to do my job. But 1,000 is a really, really large number, right? And unless you are, this unbelievably exciting startup which is open to every single programming language and fully remote, there's probably not 1,000 people that would fit your criteria. And so what they've realized is a lot of these are resumes made by AI that are mass flooded. A lot of them have no bearing on what the job posting is. And AI is actually starting to negatively affect a company's ability to use job postings to find talent. So then they say, okay, well, around the spring, I heard about all these AI screeners, and every ATS system is now creating these AI matching algorithms to your job description. So, okay, I have a resume, and it's going to tell me how good this person is, and instead of 1,000, I'm only going to look at 25. Okay, and then I'm going to interview 5 of those 25 and hire one. Right. The unfortunate part, and where we're getting to the exhaustion phase, is those matching algorithms were using a job description that was likely created by AI that wasn't really that hiring leader's true sense of what they needed. For example, it said Kubernetes on it, right? It's like, well, how mature is your Kubernetes environment? Are you dealing with ephemeral clusters? Are you just setting up Kubernetes? Like, where are we at? And there's no good way to create that robust of a job description, because then you'll have people just vetting themselves out. So you've got this job description created by AI to attract people. Your resume is created by AI, and then AI is trying to match those two things. That has failed the job market. Now, of course, it's immature. We're new to this. It will get better, absolutely. But part of what everyone out there, like I would love to, if I was in a room, I would say raise your hand if in the job search, in applying and reaching out, that you have encountered working with an AI system, right? And maybe not just Copilot, not just using, to help with my resume, but like an AI screener or some sort of AI bot when I'm applying. I'd imagine most hands would go up if you've been sending a lot of these resumes out. And it's not leading to jobs at all. And it's hurting the companies and it's hurting the candidates. And what that actually is going to do too is it's going to make full-time job hiring more frustrating. So hopefully, and this is probably why you're seeing some of that increase in DC, Greg, they're coming to specialized resources like you, I'm sure. But then they're also, and what I'm seeing is they're going contractor routes. They're going to contracting firms or to consulting firms to say, I can't find anyone to do this, so you all help me. And I know I don't want to spoil too much. We're going to talk a little bit about at the end about exactly how to position yourself for sure. But I did want to make that point. I am seeing AI fatigue right now with both job seekers and hiring leaders. However, I don't know if you can undo it. So I think we need to.
No, I don't think. I don't. No, I think it's. I think it's an awesome point. I think fatigue's a really good word. I think there's also such a level of like lack of trust of what you're actually getting now too, which is definitely really scary. I don't know what the specific stat was, but it was something like close to half of like I need to remember it specifically, but it was basically like half of like I think most companies or a specific industry last year had hired quite literally a fake candidate accidentally through their hiring process with just that same process that's there. And it's so interesting because like when we talk about the entire hiring economy, if you're a super big company, you can afford to make that mistake. It's we have so many countless people. That's a mistake. Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. But when you think about a lot of organizations, both from a size, the amount of time it's going to take to onboard someone, but even just the security risks of everything else that comes through, whether that's driving people back to us and that's leading to what we saw in that chart, or if it's just this idea of like, I need a second set of eyes on this. Like, how do I not trust, is this applicant actually who this applicant is? It is so interesting that a year ago, I don't think you and I would have ever thought, just because this wasn't a thing, this would be a conversation we were having. It almost sounds like out of a sci-fi movie. It's wild in some ways, but it's just where we're at. I kind of started pushing you toward this, and I'll see if you have any thoughts on this in general. This is basically what was listed as companies had the chance to. So the numbers you're going to see next to each of those, like the 1188 next to cybersecurity. This was a survey that was given to a collection of companies where basically the top skills they thought got a different weighting value. So the ones that had the most, it's at the top and working its way down. So I'm curious, when you look at this list specifically, or this can be something different, are there specific areas or skill sets, or if you were someone that was either looking to upskill or pivot or position themselves from what they're doing or what a company's hiring for, I guess what would you tell that person? And then even looking at this graphic specifically, like, what does this say to you specifically, or what's this make you think?
Yeah, it makes me think a lot for sure. Firstly, I don't disagree with it at all myself. These are the things that we as a firm get asked for help on all the time, right? I mentioned cybersecurity and why that might be happening, and we got into cybersecurity many years ago. The ERP and CRM stuff is interesting too, because a lot of companies are actually favoring out of the box solutions compared to just building it ourselves, for a number of reasons. I think they want kind of reliability and they want guarantees, and I think there's less value right now put on something proprietary, except for when you have to, like AI, right? Your data is proprietary. You certainly don't want to just use, Copilot or OpenAI for your own proprietary stuff, and so you want to create your own systems for it. But when I was looking at this too, though, and I was thinking about your question about upskilling, what I want to, I don't know about warn people of it, but just really acknowledge is the biggest thing that I saw in this market, and what I've asked all of my hiring leaders is when they're hiring for a position, whether it's full-time or contractor, or even hiring, us as a consulting firm to do work for them, are you looking for a certain skill or are you looking for experience? So for example, I'm a company that's never, we've always been on-prem, right? And so I want us to be in the cloud and I want us to do it right. That is skill. It's a skill-based hire, right? I literally, no one at this company knows the cloud. And so I need to hire someone that knows the cloud versus, I saw someone talk about they were in banking or a financial company. If I'm a financial firm right now and I'm experiencing some real challenge with data privacy and data compliance specific to my industry, I'm actually going to hire experience. So if I'm looking at someone, if they haven't done the exact same systems that I use right now, but they've done something very similar in that industry, I'm going to favor them. And that's just one of those things. Someone was asking like if job postings are done. I think it was Nathan actually, who I actually know personally. So it's good to see you, Nathan. But I think postings are dead because it can't answer that question. If they can, it will help us a lot. But when you look at these rankings, cybersecurity a lot of that isn't just a skill, it's actually experience that they're looking for. And so when you think about writing your resume, as long as you can get through those AI screeners, as long as you can get the right person's eyes on it, am I able to really articulately explain the experience and the impact that I've had at a company? So cybersecurity, for example, is there a number of attacks you prevented, and how did you do that? Is there a reliability factor in what you did, or a number of audits that you've gotten in the past, or SOC 2 compliance, and anything that you can add in that would have a dollar sign or a percentage? Those are my favorite things to see, because there's like a business case there. And I think that's the experience-based hiring that a lot of companies are looking for over just deep expertise in one area. Now, I'll also add, if I'm, cloud computing's on here, if I'm a pure AWS shop, all I do is AWS, we're cloud native, and you've never touched AWS, regardless of your experience, that might be a challenge for me. So there is a combo, but I did want to make that point too.
Yeah, I would say, and I think what's even something off of this too, it's interesting over the course of a year. Like, I think if you had to guess without even seeing this, what would be on this list, we probably could have got to the same list. It's so interesting how, and probably if someone asked us 12 months ago, like, oh, well, what do you think would be the top technologies organizations will be investing in at the end of the year? We probably would have said some of them. It's interesting, though, how these always fluctuate up and down. Like, I remember the end of last year, I was so convinced, and even specifically within both the public sector and private sector, there was so much talk and activity around quantum computing. And I think basically as there was more of a hesitancy to either invest, or issues with probably even federal funding that came through, we saw more of these become more pressing. So it's just interesting how this will always fluctuate up and down. Something else I would also say, when it comes to skill sets, a other piece of advice, whether it's upskilling or just for setting yourself up, I would say is, be very careful to just try to brand yourself, and don't do this just as an AI engineer because of this idea of this being in demand. Because one of the things that I have found challenging about recruiting within just the general IT space in general, but specifically with how companies are branding things, is how one company might call an AI engineer, that very well might be something closer to how another company calls a DevOps engineer or a data scientist. And I think as you're really trying to position yourself, like within these top technologies, there is some component to artificial intelligence connected to all of them. I would really find ways of thinking about how is this in connection to another core skill set, because, whether we see this trend from this first slide we showed folks, whether we see this almost looking very flat into next year, and we see companies not laying off, but maybe we see a slower rise or a different change with how aggressive companies are adding people, we might get to a spot to where it's going to be very important to basically view the skill set you have as being something that most companies might think of as two skill sets a couple of years ago. The only other thing I think before we get into Q&A, I wanted to talk about and get your take on, Chris, was a stat from the Tech Salary Guide, which I thought was very interesting, which talked about, everyone knows this idea of like, oh, networking is a very, very important skill. There was a stat that came out that 40% of candidates that said that they were referred into a company by someone or knew someone there, 40% led to an actual interview happening for that person, at least some kind of connection. So as someone's trying to position themselves or set themselves up, and say there's someone that they're like, I'm either new in my career, I don't feel like I have a big network to do this. Like, how do I do this piece? What would you kind of say to this? And I guess also, what's your thoughts on these stats in general?
Yeah. And before I touch on that, because I don't want to run too far over, but I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up my 2026 vision, which this will fit into. But I think this year was very much, I call it the perfect storm, but like the batten down the hatches a little bit. Companies figuring out their way. What are we going to do with AI? We can't throw a bunch of money into it. because we don't have hordes of cash sitting on hand unless you're, Apple or Meta or Tesla. And then I need to be building new features, but I don't have a roadmap for those features. Anyway, next year, I do think companies are going to figure out, okay, we've built this internal AI product. We need to hire for it now. It's working. The ROI is there. I'm excited to hire again. We also are seeing massive demand in the data center world, which is, of course, AI driven, where I'm going to build a data center so I can own and farm my own data forever. I think it was 30% growth this year. They said it'll be $30 trillion by the year 2030. I saw, which is insane. Data centers will create an unbelievable amount of tech jobs. Well, also, you need a lot of plumbers and electricians and all that. So a big wave of holy cow, we need talented people is absolutely coming. Now, how do I capture that? How do I make myself, known? Gone are the days where I put my resume on Monster and I get calls for good jobs, right? I think gone might be the days where LinkedIn just getting, the right messages for the right jobs. That's kind of dropping a little bit too, because there just is a lot of noise out there. AI algorithms are doing a lot of the searching. And so it's getting a little bit more what I would call old school, right? It's like, who do you know? In fact, most all of my hiring leaders, I'd say over 90%, if they don't hire through me and they don't hire a consulting firm, the person that they hired, someone new on their team. Because you want, like you made that point, Greg, about trust, right? And the erosion of like, do I trust the system and what I'm getting? If someone puts in a good word about an individual that they've worked with before, or even if they've followed on LinkedIn or met at a meetup or whatever, it's going to hold a ton of weight. I mean, a real ton of weight. It always has, but these metrics that we're seeing now on kind of the referrals and who do you know are higher than ever. And so I actually think it's awesome because it's a reminder to the tech community of staying in touch with each other. The tech community was always famous for a lot of turnover. People are at companies 12 to 24 months. You're meeting a ton of folks. You're working with a bunch of different engineers all the time. Stay in touch with the ones that you see eye to eye with, get along with, because those folks should be your best possible path to staying really, really well employed forever. And the other note I was going to say about why that's so important, we get asked a lot, and actually our last event, Greg, we talked a lot about like upskilling, the idea of upskilling. And I think a few people in the chat mentioned it. It's really hard. I mean, we're seeing the lowest amount of training done by companies for the new things like AI that I've ever seen, just because it doesn't exist. They have to make it. It's going to take years to make. So upskilling is a self-driven thing. It has to be something you're interested in because you have to go really deep on it. But rather than feel like you have to upskill and can convey that well through a resume, go talk to other people that have done the same. What have you learned at your job in the last year? What are you folks doing over there that I can try to learn and mess around with on the side to, show you an impressive demo and representing yourself. It's a real challenge right now, but everybody has to do it. It's the way the market is right now.
We're cutting into our Q&A time. Personally, I do blame your Wi-Fi.
Totally my fault. I accept that.
This is, something. So before we get to that, something I will say about the networking piece, because I think something that it's frustrating when you can hear it. And I imagine if you are someone looking for a job right now, it's frustrating if you go and people give the advice of like, oh, just go network. Because it's usually the conversation stops right there. Networking is not difficult, but it definitely is a skill to it. A piece of advice I would give people when they come to do or think about like how to effectively do this better is one of the nicest things with AI generated content is it's shown us what really, really bad networking messages look like. A networking message is maybe something that is not going to lead to you getting something directly immediately. And really think about if you're someone trying to grow a network, the goal of this right now might quite literally just be this person knows me. This is quite literally someone who's a connection, and you're building out those branches that are going to keep going. Because it's a cool time right now. Like through LinkedIn, even though it has its ups and downs, through social media, even though it has its ups and downs, you can literally speak to almost anyone in the world right now that you want to. It's a really, really cool time to be able to do that. I think an example of ineffective networking is just saying, hey, how's it going? This is my name. Here's my background. Do you have a job? I would really challenge you to try to find some connection you have. Be okay with the fact that this might not turn into anything other than this person knowing me, or there's a question I can ask this person, and try to just, build up something. Can they refer me to someone else that can do something different? Think about it as something that doesn't have to have an immediate turnaround time, but it's obviously just so important, and it's cool. Anything else before we do Q&A? Anything else you want to throw out there, Chris?
No, because I imagine our Q&A, we could probably go on for 3 days. So I don't want to cut too much into that time, but absolutely thanks everyone for being here and being interested in the topic. And, Greg and I are here to give as much advice and guidance as we possibly can. We love investing back in the network that supports us. And I've always found, part of my job in being in a unique role is to share as much advice as I can with anybody who cares to listen. So thanks for giving us a platform to listen. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Sorry about the issues. We'll see you in the Q&A session shortly.